start off with the intent, why we're here together. And when we walk away, this is where I'd like to leave us, is understand how God continues to be faithful to his promise. He promises a lot of things throughout the history, ever since we started looking at Genesis all the way what we experience today. And his promises have never failed us as human beings in this world. And that's something that we're going to come to see as we go through all these studies. We're going to value the importance of following God's will, which is really important. A lot of lessons we see ends up in dismal failure where we choose not to follow his will. I don't know about you personally, but I'll speak to myself. I've failed him many times throughout my life and recognize that the Holy Spirit convicts me each and every time. And it brings you to your knees when you know that he's just asking us to follow his will and how difficult it is for us. And what makes it easier, I guess, is us, right? Being together and supporting one another and recognizing our human frailties. And then, once again, supporting each other. And we're going to use this information gained through Genesis to strengthen our own faith. Each time we open the Bible, it should lead to a greater strength in our own faith. And as I said to you last time, every time I open the Bible, before I begin to read or study, I pray to the Holy Spirit to be with me. I never study the Bible alone. And I think that's important that we kind of embody that concept, because it really does guide you. We started Genesis and saw the whole series of creation all the way through to Noah, which is kind of like the reset. That's where life started all over again. And it's a pretty profound event. We think of the flood filling the earth and stuff like this, but remember, the vast number of people that were on the earth then. Certainly they probably weren't God's will, right? We're talking about infants, we're talking about young people just starting their lives. All sorts of types of people were on earth, and the whole thing is kind of went awry, and God needed to reset this program, and he found a righteous man in Noah. Not a sinless man, but a righteous man. And he brought him onto the ark with his 3 sons and their wives, and of course his wife. Before I came up here, I was kind of calculating with my wife. I said, good gravy. I said, how did they populate the world? I started working on an algorithm about that. So let's say Noah's wife continued to have kids. I don't know. Let's just say that. Then there was 3 other women, so that's 4 women. So if they had a kid, each woman, now get this, every 11 months. And that's possible. What do you call that when a child's born like in January and another was born in December the same year? Irish. Well, my older sister and brother are Irish twins, so I know that 11 months span that could happen, and if I did that calculating, of course I didn't finish the algorithm because I guess this birthing started at 15, let's just say at that time, then it would compound right over time. That took a lot of effort, for that many people to populate the world. His 3 sons, Noah's 3 sons that went on the ark was Shem, Japheth, and Ham. And it's in that order, from the oldest to the youngest. Shem, as you know, brought about a lot of the spiritual essence to the group. And Japheth, I kind of see him as a guy that one relative in your family that kind of keeps things together. It's usually a matriarch or something. It always keeps everybody happy and keeps them together. And Japheth kind of did that. He kind of smoothed out things between Shem and Ham and kept people together quite a bit. Ham, he served the world and his brothers. He ended up, he wasn't, what is the word I'm looking for? Noah spoke and with Ham's son and said that he was going to be, what is the word I'm looking for? He was cursed, yeah, great. He was cursed, and like Danny brought out last week, that Ham wasn't necessarily cursed. I guess he was because it was his kids, but he was blessed by God, so it was pretty tough for Noah to curse the man that God blessed, And through the generations, that came to fruition, and a lot of damage was done. First part of this, the table that we're going to get into and continue to review, is going to give a lot of names. And I started looking at these names and tried to look through the Bible, through my Robin commentary, and of course Google, and try to figure out what else can I say about some of these people. And there's not a whole lot about the individual people. So rather than me reading this to you and going through individual by individual, just have a 10,000 foot look. These are the records of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, as we said, the sons of Noah, and the sons were born to them after the flood. And all these people were generated through the wives that they brought on to the ark. I circled, I don't know what to say, Javan or Javin, there, because notice, is there a pointer on this thing? I'll probably hit the wrong button. No, I don't know. Okay, regardless of that, in the upper left-hand corner, under Gomer, you can see where Javan was, and these were the coastland people that were derived from those three that were on the ark. The nations at this time were separated, and this is the way I understand it. Let's somebody can help me with this. There's kind of a change in the structure that's happening. These people already started dispersing, and languages started developing, different cultures. And we haven't even talked about the Tower of Babel yet, but I think these stories kind of cross over one another. So if it seems like I'm saying, hey, they've already separated, and then we get to Babel, and that's where they separated, I'm not sure where it happens in this timeline where this is all happening here, but if you can reduce that down, there you go. So that's kind of basically how they separated. I borrowed that map from Danny from last week, and I thought it was really good, but it's really hard for me to put it in place. So I got a map of the area, also kind of broken out what it looks like today, so you can kind of get a better feel about, as the three brothers kind of segregated, the kind of areas that they started to populate. And you can look at geopolitical issues that are going on today, and over thousands of years, how it transitioned from those three brothers all the way through their families to some of the populations that we have today. And if you notice there in Persia, right below Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia, the Persian Gulf right in there, right above it, and we'll demonstrate a little bit, is about approximate area where the Tower of Babel was. Japheth, which was the middle child, they kind of populated into those areas, India, Middle Eastern countries, and Ham, you can see all those areas that they kind of populated. And through Ham came the Canaanites, and Nimrod is kind of instrumental in the Tower of Babel. Nimrod was kind of known as one of the first kings, our king line. He was a warrior, he was a great hunter, very powerful guy, and he's the one that led the rebellion, and kind of I was sharing a funny story, I'm not much about name calling, but when I acted the fool as a younger kid, my dad would tell me quit being a Nimrod, And I had no idea, where did you get that name? What does it mean? And obviously, I was being rebellious, and he set me straight on that, and kind of got a laugh at that. But Nimrod is the one you'll see that was very instrumental in trying to keep people together and to develop a power station. And then there's Shem. He's the father of all the children of Eber, and continue, so on and so on. I I don't want to get through that. I think when we're reading the Bible, I don't know why, but whenever I get to these passages, I read it really fast because it doesn't really tell a lot to me until you start looking at it condensed and how it brings about our faith through our leaders all the way through Jesus. Table of Nations continues on with their lineage. If that speaks volumes to somebody, they just have to kind of share it with me, and I'm open to it right now. But there's just a lot of people going down. I saw a show one time that was when the child was born, they had to stand up in front of the entire nation and speak of their entire lineage. And sometimes it went through thousands of years. I thought that was really interesting. I don't know what the intent of all that is, but I'm sure there's a lot of value in it. A lot of people utilize that platform for looking at heritage. Was that your ancestry? Yeah. I actually started that. My father-in-law, he was a Baptist minister. He lived with us until he was 99. Didn't move out, he passed away. So. But I was working on that with him, and I mean, good gravy, that just got so deep and so intense, it felt like I was back in college. Again, it continues on for more generations. And basically it'll get to something that really starts making sense to me. These are the sons of Shem, according to their families, according to their language, by their lands, according to their nations. So these families separated, and the language developed and was separated as well. Their cultures became different. And uniquely, the genetics of it is, I started studying that, probably in the commentary, I started talking about the genetics, where that's where we get a lot of difference in the visual looks of people and things. So I thought that was really interesting. And that could be affected by climate, nutrition, whatever, but a lot of different things. These are the sons of Noah, according to all the genealogies, by the nations. And out of these, the nations were separated on earth after the flood. So it's going to kind of cross over. But this is kind of one of the important slides I thought is that through Shem, all of it, all the way down through Abraham and Jesus. And that's the spiritual group of those three. Remember, Shem was the spiritual, Japheth was kind of the catalyst that combined everybody, and Ham was, Nimrod's ancestor. Again, just kind of look at how they moved throughout the land. And this took a long time, and I wish I would have done better with that algorithm and described how the population exploded. But to remember, it just started with just a very small handful of people.
Is this a test?
Anya say no. Malala, Kinchada, I know that Johnny. You don't understand it? Okay, you understand this. Come here. Excellent. You understand this?
Let's go.
You understand this? Separate. Get down. Get down. When you're in the military field, you gotta know those things rather rapidly. On your sail. Let's kind of break it down a little bit. Hi, how are you? I took a little liberty. My wife didn't teach me much Korean. She was on a journeyman field in Korea. And come along with me, the story of the Bible, Table of Nations, and Tower of Babel. We're going to be getting into Tower of Babel. But what I wanted to share with you in that funny vignette there was communication is critically important. How we understand each other and what we're saying is critically important. it's what binds us a lot of times. And I'm sure at individual tables here, there may be several languages known at each table. And if you independently knew French or Italian or Spanish, and you begin speaking to the rest of those that didn't know it, it would be difficult. But I assure you that if you only spoke that language and somebody else at another table spoke that language, throughout time, you would kind of gravitate toward one another. Okay? Now think about all these people that were gathered around this Tower of Babel and all this stuff that was going on. They started, when they separated languages, started gathering towards one another. But I just wanted to share with you there's a lot of ways to communicate. Sign language, the languages themselves, expressions is a different way to communicate. The whole earth had the same language at this time, and I know we've already talked about the separation. That's kind of where they overlap, but we're looking at the Tower of Babel now. Hebrew, which is the oldest language known to man, God's purpose after the flood, and the cooperative spread of colonization of the world by the unilingual mankind. This is, and I'm not saying Nimrod said this, because I have no indication that he did, but this is kind of the theme of the day, that they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And then they use those bricks and stones and tar for mortar to build the Tower of Babel. They said, come, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top will reach into heaven, and let us make for ourselves a name. Otherwise, we will be scattered abroad over the face of the earth. So he's wanting to build this tower, not to be godlike, but to show God how their faith is. But really, it was also about personal power. Nimrod wanted to remain centralized. He wanted everybody to stay there. And the reason why is the more people there, the more prosperity that they were going to gain, the more powerful he could become. He wanted to establish an urban center. Why? Because if he could lead a group of people, that puts him at the pinnacle of his own society. Remember, he was a strong man, a hunter, and a warrior. He wanted to establish this monument to man's spirituality. He believed that man had a spirituality to him, and he might have been more towards his own spirituality rather than spirituality towards God. But his intent was to build this tower to show the entire force that he had towards honoring God. But he was missing the mark. And what was the original mark that he missed? Yeah. To populate, well, see, we want to condense it and stay together. Yeah. And so, again, this is a reminder that they did disperse eventually as the tower was brought down. And you kind of see, I put a little picture of the tower right there, just above the Persian Gulf. Not very big. And that's really small. But that's kind of on the right, is kind of a depiction of what they believe the tower looked like. And on the left is what they believe was the tower in that location. It actually exists there. Actually, I saw a lot of military movement around that. I did a little Google Earth, and there's a lot of activity that takes place around that area, and I was curious about what was going on there. So that's out my back door. I don't know why that's on there. I didn't put that on there.
I didn't do that.
Did I go too far? What's happening here? I'll probably show you something you shouldn't see here. No, that's it. Okay, I'll go back. Anyway, that's the Columbia River. Yeah. Now I can't get back. Yeah, I missed the program.
That's what his screen said.
But, basically, I had another slide that talked about where, God made his decision to separate everyone, and he changed multiple languages. And you can imagine there were thousands of people literally congregated in one area. And when he changed the language, obviously that's where we get the term babble, not understanding what someone is saying. When he changed the languages, people started navigating towards a common language. And why would they do that?
Well, because you can work in an organized manner.
Yeah.
You have a group that can understand each other, and then they can better plan and defend themselves or whatever else they need to stay alive.
Yeah. I apologize. I had another slide here, and I wanted to explain that very thing. They were becoming powerful. God recognized this, and he thought, with this common language and these people grouped together and having leadership, the understanding that anything was possible with this group, that they would achieve unbelievable, at least secular success. And he thought it was too much, too quick, and it was missing the mark about globalization, taking care of his creation. And so he separated the languages, and people went to be more productive with those who spoke just like them, but also because they felt safe. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation, a lot of times I guess on shows it happens in beauty parlors, where you have a person who's servicing another person, and you've got someone who speaks a different language, and they're talking to one another, and they're always thinking, are they talking about me, So they get a little apprehensive and a little judgmental and maybe a little uneasy when that happens. So people gravitate toward like kinds. It's human nature, and some of you can recognize that, is that many of you, when you come into this class, you sit in the same seat every time because it's comfortable to you. You recognize it. It feels good. I try to sit in a different place all the time, which probably annoys many of you. But we all develop patterns and consistencies, and with that language, they were able to do that and actually be able to become independently prosperous, which is really kind of the intent God wanted us to do. If we could have done that with one language, all the better. If we would have continued his global view. But we chose not to do that. We chose not to follow his will. I'm going to speed back all the way through this.
That's the last slide. You going to go back?
I'm just going to go back to the intent, if you would. To the very beginning.
First slide.
You can go back here.
Yeah, I can get it here as soon as I see it. And I took a little bit of liberties with that Korean language because I'm not very fluent in it at all. I think I learned it harmonically. I really don't know the words. Well, my wife's probably going to correct me when I get home.
We're gonna blame it on the grandbaby.
She communicates real well with me. Oh, good, Greg, where's my intent? I'm sorry, I tell you, this is on a few hours of sleep.
There.
Oh, thank you. Okay. It's, understand how God continues to be faithful to his promise. How is he faithful to us? Looking at the little slideshow we had on the Table of Nations, and how faithful is he to us through the Tower of Babel. What is his intent of showing us how faithful he is to us? I mean, he saved mankind. I mean, we actually fell out of his will, but in the beginning of creation, he said that we were going to be in tandem with him to have dominion over the earth. which is our job was to take care of the earth. And he wanted to continue that project with us. And he shared that through Noah's family. And the power of the value and importance of following his will is not good results if you don't. And sometimes it's not as detrimental as others. I mean, the flood was pretty detrimental. Being exited from the garden was pretty detrimental. A lot of things happened. You know, we can go ahead and continue on in Sodom and Gomorrah and you know, the things that he's done to those who choose not to follow his will. It can be pretty detrimental. But it also could be highly blessed if we choose to follow his will. You know, I know it's quite a leap, but I look at my little grandson and I think, you know, it's in and out of God's will that I fall many times. He still blesses me in certain ways, and that grandson is quite a new blessing in our family. And I hope you all can recognize those blessings in your family. How does this strengthen our faith? How can we take this and walk day to day and strengthen our faith in this? Sir?
When I think about the Tower of Babel, it says that they wanted to create a name for themselves. That was the first distraction from God's will and God's glory. He won't share his glory with anyone. But they were, keep in mind, they were all of one accord, they were all of one tongue, they were all of one mind, they were bound together for a common goal. Read in Acts 2, it says, and they believed, and all that believed were together. They had all things common. They were sold their possessions as goods, and parted them to all men, and every man had need. This was when the church, about 3,000, was added to them. They were all in one accord. They were all for the glory of God. They practiced the gospel. They practiced the furtherance of the gospel. They practiced honoring God's name and his glory. That's the contrast. So we want our church to grow. We need to be in one accord. We need to see what our needs are in this class and in other classes and minister there and allow God to use us to fulfill the needs of other people. We're servants. We're servants of the Most High God. We're to honor his name, not create a name for us. That's the contrast between the Old and New Testament in my heart when I see this. Yes, he scattered them, but he scattered them what? To propagate. He scattered the Christians. Why? To propagate his name, to grow his kingdom, to honor who he is. That's our mission.
Yeah, very eloquently said. Thank you for proving my lesson. No, thank you so much. And that's absolutely the case here. You know, could he have done that? Could that have been accomplished if Noah and his family left Ark and continued speaking the same language? Could that have been accomplished? Well, you know, why not? Why couldn't it be? Well, because of our sin nature. But it could have been accomplished. We could have done even great things, because that's how we set it up. It was just one language. And we kind of put that to bed, and then he had to correct it. Yes, sir?
Yeah, I mean, the thought coming to my mind is that, you know, God's original plan for creation, at the time of creating Adam and Eve, was that they should multiply and populate the earth. You know. So what now happened around Babylon, was that these guys felt so cozy, staying together, you know, and we're going to move, you know. So in my own opinion, that wasn't God's plan. He wanted them to move, fill the earth, and subdue and have dominion over it. Whereas they wanted to stay in one place. So in my opinion, just my thought only, and I don't say I'm right here, so by confusing their language, it got them moving to achieve that same original objective. Well, that's my thought.
No, your thought is right, but there's two distinct periods, right? There's before the flood and after the flood. Before the flood, there was same language. Everybody's got the same language. There was some dispersion, but you got to remember the population was very small. Okay, there was some dispersion, but there was a lot of falling away from God, falling out of His will. A lot of sin developed, where the response was, we're going to have this flood. We're going to have a reset. Now, when He put Noah and his family on the ark, we still have just one language, but very few people. But the same edict was given to Noah as it was with Adam and Eve, right? To populate the world. So that, we just got to reset. We're going to do the same thing again. It went out there, and everybody's speaking the same language. And again, we fall away for our own selfish needs or our own sense of power. And that situation kind of coagulated in one spot. And then God came and changed that with the language instead of the flood that He promised He wouldn't do that again. He didn't necessarily promise He wouldn't destroy mankind in a similar fashion in a different way, but he did do a pretty unique, novel thing by changing the language, which kind of forced us apart. Yeah, no, it's the same thing. Any other insights? Yes, sir?
In the commentaries, is there any information about how many people were alive at the time of the flood?
I'll defer to anybody who's more of a theologian than me.
It's not in the Bible, but
No.
there could be
But
other
there's a
sources.
commentary where they had other historical whatever, anything. No, that doesn't exist.
Anything I would do would be to guess. Yes, sir.
Well, you notice my wife doesn't speak first, which is appropriate. The theological problem with all of this, it just goes over a lot of people's head. But with Christ and going forward, it doesn't trouble us because it's our salvation didn't depend on it. But you see what's happened. There's a reset. So why doesn't God create a situation that doesn't require a reset? And then on the other tail end of this, going forward in history, you got a problem with if He's not going to destroy mankind, or some say humankind now, that's another issue. If He's not going to destroy it that way, how does that bump up against the second coming being imminent, which I don't believe. You know, you can believe what you want. One thing the Bible said, we're not going to know that. But, so you see, there's all kinds of theological issues in doing this. One thing from Chris Martin, I talked to him about this. You know who Chris is, a former leader in the class Bible. He thinks that without a great reset, it wouldn't impress upon mankind the fact that if they deviate from God's will, it's going to cause a calamity.
Yeah.
You know. So he says there's a purpose in the reset itself. So you can see there's all kinds of theological issues here, both on the before and then the ultimate. Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't know really how to respond to that. I thought a couple of things, and you didn't answer it as I was thinking about it. The idea about the reset is, you know, we're human. We fall short all the time. And there's going to be a second coming. And, I mean, talk about resets of all resets.
Yes.
You know, that's going to be it. But, you know, I don't know, because of our own sin nature, I don't know how we can get out of this without a reset of some kind, you know, fashion that's even greater than anything that we've seen so far, biblically. You know, I don't know if I spoke incorrectly what you were saying. Dan?
No, I hear this, but I look at that, and the bottom question there is, how does the information gained from Genesis strengthen our faith? time and time again, God is the consistent partner of the covenant. You can see time after time, God keeps his promise. It's mankind that creates its own situations. And the importance of following God's will is not a fear of not being in the final. And it's more of a, because he is so faithful, because he is so consistent, how could I not love him? And the power for me personally there is having messed up a couple times, right? But think about when we get baptized. That's a restart. It's not as major as the flood. It's not as major as knocking down the tablet of that. But for us individually and spiritually, it's a restart. So I think the notion of seeing these examples as something that we can take heart in the faithfulness of God, surrendering to his will, the outcome is going to be very profitable in terms of faith. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that baptism is a reset. Simple, but man, I didn't even think of that. That's why I like conversations like this. Yes, ma'am?
Well, and going to the question about how does it strengthen your faith, when I read this and I see that they were building a tower because they wanted the top of it to go into heaven, and they wanted to reach God. And God is saying, no, I'm going to reach you. I have a plan with Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And everything in the Old Testament is about Jesus Christ. Everything points to Christ. And that's how I see it.
Well, that's a great perspective. I'm going to say it's obvious and I didn't think about it. Perfect perspective. That said a lot. Thank you.
We can find anything on the internet here. So I typed in, what would the population have been prior to the flood? Believe that the population was very high. If the growth rate in the pre-flood world was equal to the growth rate in 2000, there could have been about 750 million people. However, given the extremely long lifespans prior to the flood, the growth rate could have been much higher, which would put the population close to 4 billion at the flood.
About half of what we have today.
Major reset.
Major reset. There was, yes, sir.
You kind of look at, when you have one entity controlling a population, there's only, the thought is, like in Babel, they're only thinking about one thing. But once the population was dispersed out, it gave mankind, I think God intended this way, to expand out and look at the potentials that mankind could really utilize. But once, kind of like communism, if everyone goes the same direction in the government, communism fails because it doesn't allow for the inventiveness and the needs of those over here in a whole different area. So I think the intention was to expand man and reach his full potential.
That's a perspective that, it could very well be. Yeah, part of his concern was that they might become too powerful with the same language, but ultimately, we know that diversity kind of helps us all. Danny, you said something last Sunday about the covenant, and the covenant God made to us is, when God makes a covenant, it includes us. That's a pretty powerful thing. So it's a godly thing to be able to design and implement a covenant. So you did speak about a covenant that we enter, that we get. Do you remember what that was?
There's a couple of them. Marriage is one.
That's one my wife and I were talking about because I was thinking it was pretty a divine thing, and how can we develop a covenant? And then you talked about marriage, and I thought that was really interesting because God only kind of ordained two institutions, the church and marriage. out of all the things that we do and get involved in, that's pretty powerful. If those are the only two that God really, ordained. And so that commitment, that covenant in marriage, which is now almost placed on a platform of joke. And my son was telling me that it's registered nearly 60 to 62%. He said, Dad, you realize that it's nearly 62% of all marriages fail? And I said, oh, that's profound, son, if it's true. He said, Dad, that's not the end of it. Think about it. That's 38% marriages that haven't dissolved. But there's 16 to 22% of those that are very unhappy. It's not a good situation. So we're looking at marriages, an ordained institution by God, in the teens that's successful. That's an indictment on our society that almost begs for a reset. Now, I'm not wishing for one. Don't get me wrong. Sir?
Don't forget about the marriages that have dissolved and then come together with that new person, including, like Cindy and I were with us. So, so that may be one stat, but a lot of those people then have gone into successful marriage. I like Danny's point. The point is God is faithful. So we're in Jeremiah, we're in Lamentations 3. Okay, and that's where great is thy faithfulness. Him comes from. There's no shadow of changing with you, Lord. And so that's the rock we're built on, not just salvation, not just holiness and everything, but the unchanging, that we change and our circumstances change. And the Ecclesiastes talks about that. There are different seasons for us, not with God.
Yeah.
He is the constant of all time. And so Lamentations 3, I highly recommend everybody be familiar with that. And we hang our hat. So the Old Testament says, God is like a rock. And that rock, in other words, is not moving. It's not the house built on the sand and so on. So it's beautiful.
I'd like to say two things that just have stuck with me. The two words that you have said are dependable and reliable. This is who God is. Not man sometimes, or we think man is, but that's what I cling to. And the other thing on marriage, I have been divorced. Okay? All it takes is one person to want outside of the marriage to be done. Doesn't matter what the other person thinks. By law, at least here in Texas. And the other person just has to accept it. Now, I was divorced a long time ago and remained single by choice to raise my daughters by myself and get them through school. And I had help from God. It could be nobody else but Him. As a single mom, raising two babies, 2.5, and 2 and 3.5, by myself. But God blessed me 30 years later by the choice that I made to rely on Him to help me raise those daughters of mine. And they are awesome women. The oldest is working on her PhD. The youngest has her own business, and she's the mother of my grandchildren. But He blessed me with the most wonderful man on the face of this earth. Ironically, at my mother's funeral, he came to my mother's funeral, and he was the most godly man. He'd sing to me when we'd take road trips. He was from Tennessee. He'd sing to me. He'd call me Miss Lucy sometimes. He was the best husband I ever had. And I thank God every day. I miss him. We were married less than 2 years when he had me so really young due to his service in the military and passed away. But there isn't a day that doesn't go by that I don't remember how just him, with my grandchildren and my children and even my ex-husband, we all got along. And I'm just a wonderful man.
Let me say, I'm honored that you shared that story. And I'm grateful that there's a strong, powerful woman like you you in this room. That's the sort of thing I think that what God has done for us and what he continues to do shines through stories like that, individual stories throughout this room. And I feel closer to you people when we start our study and do this. We could talk about what his intent was and all this other stuff, but how is it manifesting in our own personal lives? Where does it become real? Real. I mean, how real does it get? That's the sort of thing that it kind of chills me when I think about it, that there's stories at every table, that we need to have the confidence, the collective support for one another to be able to share those kind of things and how it really impacts our lives. Because when we can share it in here, just spit it out, it's easier when we go outside to others who aren't like-minded like us and to share that. And we're going to draw them in by that sort of thing. And I'm again honored and grateful that you spoke that, and you all make my horrible lesson a lot better, because I feel closer to God when I'm with you people speaking in this way, where we're open and sharing with one another. Sir?
You missed the point here. She's a strong woman, but every woman in this room is a strong woman. Every single one, without exception.
I know what it is for sure. I've studied martial arts for years. I would say.
Are we wearing you out?
No, I love this. I could go on all day like this.